Still running at 7 amps, by the way. And so this is what happens if you don't have AFCI on. AFCI, just to flip it again. Yep. This is the part where iStore starts winning. iStore actually won marginally when we tried to trip it up.
So case closed, iStore is better than a Fronius inverter?
Okay, Yorick, here we are, finally doing the iStore inverter review.
I thought it was a Huawei inverter, Mark.
Huawei is the manufacturer of iStore, right? And we're going to go a little bit deeper into that in a minute. We're going to do a deep dive into a component level of the Huawei inverter and this is actually the Fronius inverter, and explain the differences between them. And there are some things that iStore do, I think, that is better than any other inverter on the market.
Now that's a twist. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, Yorick, can you explain to us the whole iStore Huawei thing? What's the difference?
So essentially, iStore is the Huawei inverter, and they're the importers for the Australian market. Essentially, in the last few years, Huawei has been using third-party importers and renaming the inverter for different brands around the world, and iStore is the Australian Huawei.
Yeah, and so Huawei is a massive company. We went to the R&D center, the Ox something or other center, you know.
They've got too much money. It's a huge facility.
Yeah, huge facility. And they're like just an absolute global giant of a company.
But iStore aren't owned by Huawei. iStore is an Australian company.
Yeah, exactly. And iStore are a solar industry expert. They've been in the solar industry forever.
Yeah.
They do the heat pumps that we did a review on. They have a solar business as well. Really stable Australian company.
Yeah, good set of guys.
You got to meet the guys on this trip.
Got to make some friends when we went to China. So, look, I feel a lot more positive about Huawei, about iStore than I did before. And I think a big part of that is that it is an Australian company with Australian software.
You kind of had this idea of, you can't just stick an iStore label on a Huawei inverter and, you weren't comfortable with that, but you are now, right?
I am a lot more comfortable with it because it's, in-house service. I think that's really important.
Yeah, okay. Now, in this review, just because we know Fronius so well, and I've got a Fronius inverter pulled apart here, I thought we would go do a little bit of a comparison about the two different inverters.
Yeah, so we've got a Fronius inverter on the wall here, and then we've got the iStore inverter as well.
Yeah.
Gee, the Fronius is so much bigger than the iStore, Mark.
Yeah, it does look that way, doesn't it? And it is bigger, but a big part of that is, let's take the
I'll pull this apart.
cover off there.
Yeah, so we've got the front cover.
A big part is all of the cable management of the inverter. So if you can see down here, the iStore inverter has all these cables and dongles and everything sticking out the bottom of it. The way that Fronius have done it is that you can bring cables actually even into the back and fit them off here, or you can have just a little neat bit of conduit out here. It looks like a much bigger inverter, but if you just take that part off, it's not significantly bigger, I guess, right?
Yeah, they're surprisingly similar in size. I think the other thing that's important of note is the heatsink. The whole iStore inverter is actually the heatsink, where with the Fronius, it's just this front plate that's the heatsink.
It's just that. So, yeah, in some ways, I rave on about Fronius for their ability to cool, but the iStore inverter does have front and back is a heatsink. The whole box is a heatsink, where if you look at the back of the Fronius inverter, it's just plastic.
Yeah.
That brings us on to when we're talking about cooling, about fans.
Yeah, so Fronius inverter's got a really big fan on the front of it. It's really obvious. There's no fans in a iStore inverter.
And you would have thought that, right? This is your... So this is the 10 kilowatt single phase iStore fan that actually sits up underneath just like that. So it's a fairly big fan, but nowhere near as big as and well designed, I guess, as the Fronius fan cooling system.
Yeah, so this is an older model. This is one of the newer models.
Yep. So the fans, one thing I found really interesting about the external iStore fan is that it can reverse. So there's 4 wires there, and apparently once a week or so, it will reverse, which turns out to be important.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the issues we had with the Fronius inverters not long ago was they were a bit of a gecko catcher, so they made an improvement, and now geckos are no longer an issue.
Yeah, so even if geckos do get caught in this, once a week, it's going to reverse, and the gecko will probably come free easily.
Well, just an easy fix, isn't that, Marv?
Internal fans too. So Fronius, we'll show you this later, but they've got 2 quite big kind of computer internal fans, and iStore has one, and that is just for hotspot turbulence is the way that I've heard it put once, which I thought was nice. We just want to dissipate that heat all the way around the
Does that generate a lot of noise, Mark? 'Cause
not the internal fans at all, no. The Fronius fan is really quiet compared to the predecessor, the Snap inverter, but it still does make a bit of noise, and the Huawei fan, you basically basically wouldn't know it's there unless you look for it.
It just looks like a computer fan to me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, nice little device. So I think one of the other things, I wanted to ask you about, Mark, with the iStore is monitoring. I heard that Huawei don't actually make the software for the iStore monitoring.
They're using a different monitoring platform. And to be frank, that's a little bit of the reason that Huawei has sort of left. They've been accused of spying and all this kind of thing. And, they've got problems with their communications in Australia and been banned in some parts of it, stuff like that. Huawei still is in Australia, right?
Yeah, but it's just the 5G rollout that was the concern.
Yeah, exactly. And so I guess people were skittish about having a Huawei inverter on their wall, which maybe is fair enough. So now we don't have any, China or Huawei don't have any control over that inverter. It's based in Singapore.
Yeah. As Universe.
Yeah, Universe is a platform that they're using, which is a decent monitoring platform. Does everything you need it to do, is simple enough for the customer to use. I can go deep dive into it.
Yep.
I don't find it as user-friendly as a Fronius inverter. That's probably because I'm not used to it,
Yeah, that could be the case. But I think the main takeaway, though, is the servers aren't based in China. I mean, Huawei can't just turn your inverter off at a whim, can they?
Yeah, and this is what there is. If you can read up on articles about this, is people are concerned about not Huawei specifically, but Chinese inverter manufacturers where they have some little radio signal in there and China can break in and blow up your inverters or something like that, which is a real backdoor, right? Which there's been no proof that that's happening. Yeah. Some people have pulled apart systems and thought that they found something that was sus.
It's a bit of conspiracy theory, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and that may be true, maybe not true, but realistically, if that's what you're concerned about, is China has a front door to every Chinese, but that they can just go and do a firmware update and brick your inverter if they wanted to. So not the case with the iStore inverter, which I think is a big plus if that's what you're concerned about, cybersecurity and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
iStore isn't in that camp anymore.
Yeah, I think that partnership has worked really well. So there's a lot of bits and bobs on the table, Mark. You're looking a bit more like a mad scientist than you usually do. What's going on here? I mean, what kind of testing have you been doing?
We've been doing everything, but let's start off with one of the more interesting parts, I thought, is that iStore has, and many inverters now have 3 MPPTs, which is kind of like 3 engines.
Okay.
So you can have 3 groups of panels on your roof.
So what is an MPPT and what does it do?
Engines is one way of looking at it, but it's a maximum power point tracker. So if some of your panels are shaded and some of your panels are facing north and some of your panels are facing south, each of those panels has basically got like a different gearbox, so that it can get the most power out of each array of panels. And a lot of people are switching to 3 maximum power point trackers.
Sure.
Now, ages ago, this is where the testing got interesting. So Fronius had just kept with 2 MPPTs on their smaller inverters like this.
Yeah.
iStore has 3. Now, I tested this against a GoodWe where I had, now stick with me here, right? So up on the roof just here, I've got an array of north panels, an array of east, and an array of west. And then I've replicated that. 2 lots, and I run them into both of these inverters at the same time, and we monitor it with our Fluke data logger over there, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to see how one inverter performs over the other. Now, if I've got an east and west array here, in Fronius, I have to put that into the same MPPT, the same gearbox or something like that, right? Now, let's say I unevenly shade because the shade comes over and I shade just the western array. If you're a little bit deep into inverters, you'll understand that these 2 arrays want to work on independently of each other.
We've actually got a video and an article on that on our website as well.
Yeah, exactly. So now is Huawei or iStore going to outperform because it's got 2 gearboxes, 2 different MPPTs or 3 in that situation.
Yeah.
And what I found with GoodWe, Fronius actually worked better because its MPPT algorithm, its gearbox, is just so good it was even better than GoodWe.
Well, we would expect that from the Fronius. They're the best on the market.
But then I loved it that finally I found an inverter that was better than Fronius. Marginally. So Fronius is still really good at working with 1 gearbox and 2 different orientations, 1 MPPT. But iStore actually won marginally when we try to trick it up.
So case closed, Huawei or iStore is better than a Fronius inverter?
In shading, yeah, you can get a little smidgen better out of it. So that was actually pretty cool, which I've tested so many inverters the same way against Fronius, and Fronius just walks all over them. It was, apart from SMA, to be fair. Yeah. So Fronius or iStore and SMA are all up there with, they know what they're doing.
So it's a seriously good inverter. Heat testing. We've got a thermocouple here on the table and a thermal camera. What are you doing with these, Mark?
Yeah, so we put this thermocouple in the middle of capacitors. So we put them in both at the same location in the middle of capacitors, ran them with those 2 even arrays, and got them up to sort of 7 kilowatts. Unfortunately, I didn't have that much roof space to have like 15 kilowatts up on the roof. They're running at around about 7 kilowatts each. And the iStore inverter, we're talking about fan cooling and everything like that, it was running at up to 20 degrees hotter.
20 degrees Celsius hotter than the Fronius inverter.
Than the Fronius inverter internally.
Why does that matter?
Well, okay, let's get into it. So why does that matter? This is why I ripped this apart. So this is a Fronius board. And so this is where, by the way, this is the top section actually here. This is where I put that thermocouple in the middle of these and try to make sure it was effectively in the same spot for both of them, right? And so that thermocouple there, these capacitors here are heating up. That's what I'm concerned about. Let's do a real quick rundown of what this inverter does. So there is your MPPTs here. Your battery comes out of there as well, but your 2 strings of solar come in at this point, and that's your MPPT. So it's just working at the best voltage and current so that it can get the most power out in any given situation. Very simply, we then go over here to the DC bus capacitors. So the DC bus capacitors are like a voltage reservoir or a voltage tank.
Okay.
Because of what's going to go on next. It wants to have this stable level of voltage no matter, what's happening on, if you turn on a fire hose or you turn on a little tap sort of thing, So
it's acting as a buffer before it does a DC?
Yeah, kind of like a soak or something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is just still on the DC side. And then we get to these IGBTs here on the back. So this is a transistor, big word for a transistor, that is switching at around about something like 10,000 times a second.
Yeah.
An IGBT will switch. They heat up real lot. So you've got thermal paste on there, and that sits on the back of that heat sink that was there before yours.
So I'll just grab the heat sink again. So actually the IGBTs connect directly to the heatsink. So these are the bits that actually get really hot in the inverter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've got some thermal pads here to soak up some of the heat from everything as well. So we're going then, and these IGBTs, what they're doing is switching 10,000 times a second to change this DC wave into your AC sine wave, right? That people would know about. So it's kind of giving you a really messy wave at that point. So it comes out of there, and the next simple step
goes into the inductor.
Into your inductor. A choke is another way of talking about that. So while this is a voltage reservoir, this is kind of like a current filter. So it's cleaning out your current sine wave. Yeah, so they're the kind of main parts. Now, why does that matter? A big part of that is this is producing heat. Your IGBTs are producing heat. And your capacitors, they don't really produce much heat.
Yeah.
But they don't like heat. So you've got a capacitor there, right?
Yeah, so I've got a couple here. I think one's out of a SMA inverter. I think I've got one out of a
Zever inverter. Yeah.
Zever solar. Yeah. All of them have them. So is it usually the capacitors that go?
Yeah, so that's what goes. So there's little foils around there, basically, and then they fill it with an electrolyte sort of gel. As soon as you start using this, it will start losing molecules of electrolyte. And so they have, like these want to run at 85 to 100, 105 degrees, or normally a maximum of 85 degrees for however many hours, depending on the design life of it. So the cooler you keep these,
the longer the inverter lasts.
The longer they're going to last, right?
Okay.
And that's where they have that rule of thumb. For every 10 degrees hotter you run a component, it halves its life.
What you're saying is that if it's running 20 degrees hotter than the Fronius, will it only last a quarter of the life?
No.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of what they would say in a rule of thumb. And that's not just the capacitor, but all the components. And I tried to find out as much information as I could about these different capacitors. I couldn't really. But basically, we were having the iStore inverter in an air-conditioned room, running at only 7 kilowatts, get up to 75 degrees. So that's almost up at that 80. You can easily see it getting over 85 degrees. In fact, we got it up at 77, 78 degrees, I think.
Yeah. Did you start seeing any derating? Or what was going on there?
Yeah, so that's another part. So, well, the first part, right, is that a little bit with iStore, I'm concerned, like those iStore engineers are even smarter than I am, would you believe it, Yorick? So,
I believe that.
they might know a little bit more than I do, but I've got to be a little bit concerned thinking, well, Fronius have taken it really conservative.
Maybe too conservative?
Maybe too conservative, but I know their inverters don't fail. We've installed like over 6,000 of them, and they've got a really low failure rate, right?
Yeah.
iStore have not really, and they've really crammed in all of their design into a really compact design. One part of the reason they were able to do that is instead of using these IGBTs, which switch at 10,000 cycles per second, They're using these MOSFET transistors.
So like a newer technology?
It's a newer technology. Some might argue that it's not as robust to sort of surges and stuff like that, but it is switching a lot faster, theoretically creating less heat, switching at 100,000 times rather than 10,000 times maybe.
Yeah. And they've got a lot more of them as well. This one's only got 3, but I think the iStore had 12.
Yeah, 12 little. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how that's broken down inside, but it looked like there was kind of 6 that were broken into 2, so sort of 12 in the iStore.
I'll take these out.
Here's your fans, by the way, 2 fans inside. So it is kind of really interesting, and in some ways, like I said, I'm not the designer of this product, but I do look at Fronius and go, gee, I like the way that they are being conservative. I don't know how ultra conservative they're being. You did bring up an interesting point about the derating of the iStore inverter.
Was that because of how hot it was getting?
Yeah, it was just getting really hot internally, and they know that they don't want these running at 90 degrees for a long time, or so. Once it gets to a sort of 75 degrees internally, it starts derating down, and we got that with our data logger. It starts to run at 9 kilowatts for a while, then it might go back up to 10 kilowatts.
So it's doing a zappy.
What zappy the EV charger is doing.
Are we seeing much derating with the Fronius inverter in similar conditions?
No, it's hard, and so we did this test in a similar way and didn't find any derating. If you start chucking 20 kilowatts of inverter on that and put it on the north face and it's running hot, yeah, sure, it derates. If that fan gets blocked by a gecko, yeah, it derates. Obviously it built a lot more robust. So I guess my takeaway with this is I kind of like the iStore inverter. I really like the iStore inverter. I know the Huawei engineers are just genius. They know what they're doing, right?
We've toured their factory. They test upon test upon test upon test. And I think there is something to say about their rigorous quality control process with both the products that they're making, but also the products that they're bringing in to make the inverters and batteries.
Yeah, but if you're in a really hot area, or your inverter is going on the north wall, in a hot spot, or wherever it might be in a hot garage, you want to oversize this with a battery and put 20 kilowatts of solar on it.
I would put 25 on the iStore 10 kilowatt.
25, really?
25, yeah.
That's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
You can, but you shouldn't. Is my takeaway. Don't flog the guts out of this one. Fronius even more conservative, and I think, can we only go up to 15? 1.5?
So we can go up to 15 on the Fronius inverter. The iStore, we can go up to 25. But look, truthfully, there's only so much power you can actually pull out of that array and through a 10 kilowatt inverter.
Yeah, so I'd be comfortable putting 15 kilowatts on that. I'd probably rather go Fronius if I was doing 15 kilowatts than iStore, even though on the spec sheet, they'll let you do what you want to do. Yeah. Now, remember, when you plug this into a battery, it's not just running for, 8, 12 hours a day or whatever. It's running 24 hours a day and night, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You're really starting to shorten the life of these capacitors, especially if you start running it so hot.
So we spoke about derating and obviously the inverter trying to protect itself. What have we got set up here, Mark? What is AFCI?
AFCI. And now this is a part, just to flip it again, this is a part where iStore starts winning, right?
Okay.
So, AFCI is called arc fault circuit interruption.
Before you do anything, I'm just going to get my safety gear.
Get your Captain safety gear on. No, fair enough. Don't do this at home. Oh, I can hear that arcing already. I'll just put that together. So at the moment, we've just run this down from the roof. You can see our cable running up into the roof, and I'm running at 7 amps, which isn't crazy. What are we, 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Thanks, Captain Safety. And so I'm not sure how much you're going to see on this at the moment, but if we start opening this up, so this is connected to a Fronius inverter. Now, by default, they don't have that arc fault circuit interruption turned on. We can go into the back and turn it on. But the problem with arc fault circuit interruption, Yoz, is that it can nuisance trip. So let's say if you go down to the warehouse and get your welder out and start welding, the inverter might pick up, I noticed an arc somewhere. I noticed a signature that looked like this.
Yeah, because it's software that picks it up.
Yeah, and so I'm going to turn it off, right? And so they really have to work on tweaking it. Years ago, I tested this with Fronius and Huawei. Huawei was better than any other inverter every single time. Some inverters claim to have it and they don't have it, as Huawei pointed out to us.
Can you show us it in action?
Yeah, okay. Okay, there we go. So, bit of an arc there, but we're still running at 7 amps. I think we're... Oh, okay, what do we reckon? Still running at 7 amps, by the way. And so this is what happens if you don't have AFCI on. And it gets pretty smoky.
Do you want me to hit it with a fire extinguisher? No. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
All right. See, Captain Safety is not such a bad idea.
Yeah, no, went a little bit worse than I than I thought.
So AFCI was turned off?
AFCI is off by default on Fronius. Now, they are telling me that that's going to change soon.
Yeah.
So that they're going to turn it on. They're comfortable with it. What they don't want, as you can imagine, what I don't want is I don't want all these systems, my inverter switched off, it's AFCI, we've got to turn it back on again. We don't want nuisance tripping, right?
No, we don't. But we also don't want this.
We don't want this either, right? And so Huawei, I'm not going to test Huawei because it's really boring because you open up the thing and then you just don't see anything, right?
Yeah.
So as soon as it detects the tiniest little arc, I can't even see, it'll turn it off. So,
all right. So after all that excitement, I think I might just say a couple of things about the battery because that's where my area of expertise
yes,
lies.
let's talk about the battery.
So Huawei, this is a hybrid inverter, as is the Fronius inverter as well. They both are compatible with batteries. iStore have their own brand of battery. We'll go through and actually do a deep dive into that battery at your mother-in-law's place in a couple of weeks. But yeah, essentially they've got a double DC to DC optimizer. I guess SIG, that's where they copied it from. The other thing too is there was a few little limitations in terms of throughput, but we'll go through that in detail.
Yeah. So that DC to DC converter idea, I don't like it. I'm just going to be frank, and I did bring that up with the head of batteries over there, and I think he kind of felt I was having a crack at him. But I'm trying to understand what they're trying to do. Is that BYD and Batteries Forever have been quite reliable technology, right? Solar batteries. And Huawei have come along and have saw a problem that was so big that they decided to go away from minimalistic engineering and put on an extra component that loses efficiency, that is potentially less reliable.
Yeah.
But they obviously felt the need to do it.
Well, I think one reason that they've decided to do it is that they, unlike BYD, where they make their own batteries, Huawei source batteries or cells from a range of different manufacturers. So the other thing too is the iStore batteries run at a low voltage and then the optimizers bump it up to the inverter voltage. So it gives you a bit more flexibility in terms of the cells that you can purchase from different suppliers.
Yeah, and I did bring that up with Huawei, the head of the battery division. He didn't like that accusation. It probably isn't the real reason.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting for me to know the real reason behind it, whether they think it's just a safer way of doing it, whether they think that if they have a warranty issue, they don't have to replace every single module, whether they think it's a good marketing idea as well. I don't exactly know where it lies.
But it's obviously a Huawei technology that SIG, Anker, and EcoFlow have all integrated into their systems.
And if you're going on some kind of new fandangle technology and some new idea, I'd probably trust Huawei to do it over those others, right?
So would I. I think Huawei, as we saw in the factories, they test upon test upon test. Anyway, Mark, I reckon that's enough excitement for this video. When do we install your mother-in-law's battery?
Yeah, okay. I think when Warren gives us a date, but maybe next week or something like that.
Sounds good.
We'll install that. We're going to test it with our data logger, and we're going to start getting into efficiencies of batteries. Because I think the iStore inverter battery is going to be a lot less efficient than something like a BYD, but we won't know until we test. So thanks for holding the fire extinguisher for me.
You thought I didn't need it, but, we got there in the end.
Okay, rightio. We'll catch you next time.
Catch you next time.